Okay, everybody, thanks so much for joining me today. As I said before we started recording, this is our first experiment in an idea of having district leaders have a sort of a focus group where we kind of dig in deep into the weeds, maybe a little deeper than we used to back in the day before we had this platform of Zoom and the comfort of using it and having conversations online. So I really appreciate you all taking the time and to share your insights today. I guess we'll get started. I know we kind of introduced all of ourselves to each other, but maybe we can start again. And maybe I'll ask you to do it within the context of our topic here. As you know, DEI is one of these phrases, one of these acronyms. Education and education technology love their acronyms, right? We have they're always everywhere. And as a journalist and walking through and going to sessions and hearing an acronym such as DEI, I would sagely nod my head and say, I know exactly what we're talking about here, and having no real kind of clue what it means and specifically what it means to kind of the day-to-day operations when it comes to a school district. So maybe as we go around and kind of do an official intro to each other, let me ask you, give us your definition of what DEI or what it means in your district, and maybe specifically how you might explain it to someone who is not as privy or is not on top of it, but who might have questions. I know it's somehow become political in a lot of ways, which continues to confuse me to a certain degree. But with that, I'll stop blabbing, and maybe Julie, I'll start with you.
Sure. Just throwing out some more of those acronyms, right? So in our district, it would be working alongside our SPED, DPI, and SEL departments, right? So
Right.
all of that to say, my name is Julie Mavrogeorge. I am a CTE coordinator in Fresno Unified School District, which is in pretty much the smack dab middle of California, in the Central Valley. What I would say, well, DEI is diversity, equity, inclusion, and it doesn't live in one place. I think some people try to say, oh, we need a DEI team, right? And I think it's the responsibility of the entire district to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion. Now we do have, our Department of Prevention and Intervention, DPI, and our SPED department, which is our special education. They have formalized some trainings for our district and teachers. So we have about 73,000 students and about 11,000 employees. So we're a larger district, and just to educate people on what that means. To me personally, it means that I need to create the programs, because that's what I do, create programs, whether it's during the day or after school, for students that is going to help educate them, just kind of in their own culture, in their own way. So here in the Central Valley, we have students from Hispanic backgrounds, African American backgrounds, from the Middle East, and a very large, significant population of Hmong families. And so when we think of just ethnicity in diversity, right, all of those students need to learn how each culture is different, right? But then there's also the equity, inclusion of gender preference and a lot of different things. So to me, it's educating myself and our team, but also educating, teacher, staff, and students, because we only know what we know until we know something different, right? And so that's kind of where I feel like I have to develop, or I'm driven to develop those types of programs. I will say my passion is specifically for the neurodivergent population, which also includes, and our foster and homeless youth, because we have about 700 students who fall in that category, the foster and homeless, and then the neurodivergent students, which I define as would be, students that maybe have been diagnosed with ADHD or ADD, autism, dyslexia, a variety, anxiety and depression. And so those are those students in particular are the ones that are near and dear to my heart. And I try to educate people on, okay, we're all human. Like, we need to be treated as humans. And how do we go about training our students to realize where we come from is important, how we're wired is also important, but we need to learn to work and understand people who are different than we are.
What a huge insight straight off the block there. I mean, just listening to you talk, you're talking about everybody, right? I mean,
pretty much.
You hit all the ethnicities, you hit all the different, other aspects of mental health and the idea of getting access. And when you get down to that, it really is kind of an all encompassing, if not overwhelming, sort of condition. So, Julie, thank you for that first. Allison, maybe I'll put you on the hot seat next.
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Allison Reid. I am the Senior Director for Digital Learning and Libraries in the Wake County Public School System in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. And so for me, I do a lot of work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would like to add diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. You hear DEIB sometimes, because I do believe that creating a space where each student every day feels like they belong is critical for actually moving the needle for students and allowing students to become the most successful version of themselves that is possible. I loved some of the things that Julie said in touching on the different types of otherness, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion means that we see people for who they are. We are not blind to their otherness, but rather we see their otherness. We can celebrate their otherness where we can and use that as a basis to make sure that we are giving those students what they need as individuals, and to see them wholly so that they can grow, like I said, into the best version of themselves. A lot of the work that I do in my district, because I'm in a very large district, we're at about 160,000 students. And so a lot of my work is really big picture, right? And so in looking at policies and processes for us, and when we're making decisions, we've got to keep in mind that each student every day, regardless of their race, nationality, gender, religion, orientation, neurodivergencies, whatever their otherness might be or might not be, right? Are the decisions we're making made with consideration of all of our populations, right? Do we see ourselves represented in our curriculum, in our texts, in our decision making? Are we making sure that we are reaching out to not just stakeholders, but a diverse set of stakeholders? So we are hearing from all the voices, not just the ones that are easy to align with what we're already doing, right? Are we really intentional and strategic about hearing from a diverse group of stakeholders, but then taking into consideration, sometimes when we are trying to make decisions, or sometimes we have a tendency, I think, in the ed space to talk about DEI and then try to make what we're currently doing fit into the DEI box. And are we courageous enough to have conversations and really look at what we're doing and make changes where necessary? And so a lot of my work is around asking questions to make sure that we're really being serious about the work we do there. It's fascinating. I'm fortunate enough to be in a district large enough that we actually have an Office of Equity Affairs, which is fabulous, right? And so we have an equity policy in our district, and we've had a lot of discussion within the district over the years is, do we need a separate office for that, or should we all be doing that work? And there's this tension, right? Because if we don't call it out specifically and spend the time focusing on these things, people will claim they're doing it already and nothing changes. But then at the same time, when we make it separate, it feels separate from all the work we're doing. So I think balancing that tension of it being strategic and intentional, and yet integrated into the work we are already doing in education spaces, is really where the hard work comes in. And so I love doing that work, and I love having conversations like this. So thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. And another insight that I'm pulling out just here at the get-go, another kind of complicating element of this is, it sounds like it's twofold for your job, where obviously a focus on the student and on the child in terms of the instruction and how you do it. But then there's the back end aspect of this too, in terms of the taking care of the needs of families, and it's just kind of working in your day-to-day business, which is something that we all need to kind of reconsider. And I think the past couple of years have been reconsidered, right?
Yeah, context matters, and we have to be asking the questions to understand the context for each and every student.
Yeah, great. Allison, thanks. And Dr. Wise.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for having me. My name is Cynthia Wise, and I am the Principal and Chief Academic Officer for the Charter Branch of Waco ISD. I would like to just start off by saying that I have dedicated my entire administrative career to ensure that students of color receive a high-quality education that is safe, inclusive, and recognizes and celebrates diversity while meeting every child's needs so that they can thrive. Equity is meeting each individual student's needs, their exact needs. And here in Texas, and as well as diversity, to me, diversity stands for the D, diversity, acknowledging that there is a range of differences in the classroom, and inclusion signifies embracing those differences, and so that all students feel supported. Here in Texas, well, in this district, and I believe it may be a statewide framework that's being used called MTSS, that stands for a multi-tiered support system. And we support students not in just this system is not just set up to support schools and classroom teachers from the academic side, but also for behavior and social, emotional issues that children come to school with every day. So we at least we're on track to at least acknowledge that we need some type of tiered social emotional system in schools. Sometimes I hear teachers say, I have to be the teacher, the social worker, the psychologist. I feel like I have to be all of these things to children. So we were pleased when the MTSS framework was designed to support teachers in the classroom. But I also believe that equity should be applicable to your employees, not just for students. All employees should be appreciated and allowed to make meaningful contributions, and that would boost morale in the workplace. So that is my interpretation and what I have experienced with DEI.
Interesting. Thank you so much. In mentioning the faculty and the teachers and the needs and supporting their needs, one of the things that came out from the report where the secretary mentions the importance of empowering teachers to become designers of active learning and specifically using technology in a way to do this. I can also hear a number of teachers saying, yeah, great, thanks a lot. Here's 5 more other things that I now need to incorporate into my day-to-day. Maybe I'll ask each of you, and then I'll step back because I'd love to hear you guys interact about your experiences. Talk about how these high-minded concepts, which are hugely important, but also kind of esoteric, play out day to day in your districts. Can you give some examples of how, just from in the 7 to 7 hours that you're at least working every day, how these concepts turn out in terms of the active participation of both teachers and students?
Yeah.
I'll let anybody jump in to start.
I'll jump in. So for starters, I want to say it was the last EdTech plan, not this year's, but the one that was released previous from the Federal Department of Education. They actually discussed active versus passive consumption of technology. Then they've extended that a little bit further in this last plan, which I love. But we sort of took that and ran with that, and we started looking a little bit a little more closely at how our students were using technology in the classroom. And this is pre-COVID, but then of course, wow, did we see it when the pandemic hit. And one of the things that is fascinating when you look at it is that typically students of marginalized subgroups are often, when we give them technology to use, we give them technology that is passive consumption. We would like for them to watch a video. We would like for them to do a drill and kill review online, right? Those students of those more lower performing or at-risk subgroups that's the kind of technology we give them. And we wonder why the heck it doesn't work, right? Because we're putting them in front of technology and it is as active as watching the Flintstones, right? They're just soaking it all in and they're not actually doing anything. They're not making decisions. They're just receiving, right? And while they're doing that, we've removed the opportunity for conversation, dialogue, or interaction with a human being, an adult who might be able to get to know them, who might be able to speak to their context in their life and to be able to do the thing that is the art of teaching, right? So we've given them technology in ways that quite frankly stink, right? Because it is passive consumption. And in doing so, we've removed the human element of the interaction. Now, what we see on the flip side of that is that our AIG students, our academically gifted or our advanced students, when we give them technology, we ask them to create with it. We ask them to make a video or create a slide deck or do research or make a movie or write a script. Far different cognitive ask of the student, regardless of the modality. And typically, when we're asking them to have those creative uses of the technology, right, that involves them having a conversation with someone, collaborating with other people, all those things, those 4C skills that we swear are important, right? And so how we use technology, number one, active versus passive, we see a big difference in that. But our topic today is DEI. And so when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, how we use technology with specific subgroups can either exacerbate or help with the achievement gap that we see. And so making sure that as we're making decisions about how we integrate technology into our instruction and into our curriculum, are we allowing students of all achievement levels and all subgroups the same opportunities to use technology in an active way, in a creative way? Because the difference is staggering, right? And I think a lot of times it is easier to put those kids, whatever category you want to talk about, in front of the computer, right? But we do more damage when we do that than we do good, right? And it's well intended and all of those sorts of things. But I think this really simple language shift from the National EdTech Plan, active versus passive, when you explain it that way, anybody can understand that. And it's no longer super edu-speak or anything like that. Parents can understand it, right? And so that's why when you look at research on gamifying learning, it's so powerful, right? Because kids are actively engaged in what they're doing and making choices as opposed to just passively, consuming tech. So just some thoughts on the difference and how we have inadvertently started one way, but we're starting to see some changes. So this language from that EdTech plan and other publications, I think, are really, really helpful as we look at how we design instruction for all students.
Well, if I can jump right in my district, every student has a Chromebook. We are what we call one-to-one, but the downside of that, it is for class use only. And my school, and particularly this district, we are a Title I district. And my school in particular, 98% of my students are on free and or reduced lunch. But we do purchase online educational materials and to use, of course, with technology, and that's more of the passive usage of technology. It's incorporated throughout the day. But then the flip side of that, I have friends that work in the more affluent districts, and those children are allowed to take their Chromebooks home. And you pay a fee if you damage it, I believe $50, and no families can afford to do that. And so the students that are from these Title I schools, they're at a disadvantage because the only use that they have far as using Chromebooks or computer is at school. And the other side of that is, let's say that we allowed them, the district allowed them to take these Chromebooks home. Most of them, these homes, they don't have an internet service. So now you have another problem because it's very expensive. I work every day and I pay over $180+ a month to have internet and cable. I mean, that's huge, even for me. And can you imagine these families who are just struggling to make ends meet? You can give them the devices, but when they get home, where's the connectivity? Where's the internet services? So in my opinion, the issue is beyond being equitable access. I think the issue is more affordability. Internet access is not affordable for all families. So that raises the question, is this about equitable access to technology, or is this about affordability? And this creates a digital divide between those who can afford it and those who cannot. So one may assume if you come from a higher social economic background, then you have the upper hand. Even though I would say this, even though the students that come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and I'm just going to call them what it is, children in poverty, because I see it every day. And let me tell you, poverty is a hard life. But when they come through the doors here, we want it to feel normal and forget about what's out there. This is your safe place. And we have been very successful at that. And I once heard someone say, and then they go home. Okay. And that is the reality. So nonetheless, technology is here to stay. So we need to understand what technology can and can't do for the users. But at the same time, it is expensive for many families and they cannot afford the additional costs. So I wish there was some type of government subsidies for these low income families. Let's say $25 a month flat rate for these children who come from those families that are in the poverty range, is easily to identify them because we do it in order to determine if they will receive free or reduced lunch. You can use the same list.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Julie. Does that resonate at all with what you see?
Absolutely. So I took some notes like off of what it's kind of fun going last, because then you get to take a little bit of notes on what everyone else has shared. So one thing that Allison pointed out, right, was like that interaction for students. So just to give you a little background on Fresno Unified, we as well are over 90%. I don't know the exact percentage, but I believe it's around 92, 93% of free and reduced lunch. Like I mentioned before, we have about 1% of our student body that are either homeless or foster youth, which equates to about 700 students in our district, which is a huge number in my opinion. We also, our one-to-one devices, our students do take those home, and those are either HP laptops or Lenovo laptops. And when we talk about like coming back from the pandemic, right, our students are just so disengaged regardless of their socioeconomic status or their, ethnicity or whatever. They're not as engaged with humans, right, as they were prior to the pandemic. Sure. And so what we have taken to is that even that interaction with their peers, right? Like they're for 2 years, at least in California, we were shut down for 2 years, where the kids were at home on a screen or with their siblings, and many of ours were parenting siblings themselves, right? The 11-year-old, 12-year-old is taking care of their 4 or 5 infant siblings, right? So all of that to say, we have tried to, so for the internet, I wanted to speak to the internet. So what our district has done is they applied for a grant that enabled us to put up Wi-Fi towers in each of our regions. There are 8 regions across Fresno, to where it's a Fresno unified tower that families can connect to and gain Wi-Fi. We also have through one of the internet providers, right, where students and families of Fresno Unified can get internet access for $10 a month. So that again, those were both through grants, which our district grant team was, sought after, and our IT team. So I was formerly on the IT team before I moved to CTE. So I have a little bit of knowledge about what's working down there as well. I think talking back to what Allison was saying about like that interaction and being able to engage students with technology, it is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. My main focus, honestly, has been the integration of technology, or integration of students with technology in current classes, as well as an after-school program. So, like I run our esports. I help to run our esports programs. But what I've focused on is, those teachers who are teaching video production or graphic design or marketing or business management. And I've said, okay, instead of teaching, and I'm going to use the word dry material because it's been lecture based, right? Or depending, some is more exciting than others. So let's just put it that way. But if you take esports, kids are already into gaming, right? And if I can teach a student to do video production or streaming or shoutcasting in esports, they're still learning those 4 C's, right? Because they've got to collaborate, they've got to communicate, they're creating something. It's all embedded within there. And so, like, I have a dear friend who says we're going to cover the broccoli in chocolate, and they don't even know they're eating the broccoli, right? So when you take that, what seems maybe dry, and you put in creative ways of delivering it to them, that gamifying of even general education. I'm a huge proponent of Minecraft education and what you can do with Minecraft in a classroom. There's not a single subject that you cannot teach within Minecraft. There's not a single assessment that you cannot do within Minecraft. People go, oh, but where are they going to write? Use the book and quill, use the portfolio. There are ways to actually export documents and pictures and videos from Minecraft. And I think we have to take us older school educational people, right? And we have to retrain our way of thinking how to deliver. And that then provides that equity and inclusion for students where they are, but still delivering the content they need in order to succeed in society.
So what percentage of your students have access at home?
All of them.
All of them. Is that a result
Yes.
of the last couple of years of the pandemic? Was that the case before
Correct.
they were forced into
No, so
remote learning?
correct. Not all students had access to Wi-Fi because we didn't have those towers up yet. They were being put up as we went out on the pandemic. But now, because of the location of those towers and the agreement we have with the internet provider in our area, right? I can't say for 100%, right? Because there may be a
Sure.
family out, right, that has and can't afford the $10, and maybe the connection to the tower, they're just too far away from it. But generally speaking, our population does have access to Wi-Fi through Fresno Unified.
Well, kudos to you guys. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was about a 3.5 year undertaking of getting it implemented.
Yeah.
But I know we're fortunate because most districts are like
Gosh,
Cynthia,
yes.
right? And it's so sad, that students don't or can't have access to that. We do have labs on campuses that kids can come to as well, that through CTE department that we've set up with even better devices. But again, like you said, it's from that 7 to 7, right? Or 7 to 5 that they have access to it. So even in the evening, they, you know, if they don't have Wi-Fi at home, they wouldn't have access.
And we, oh, I'm sorry.
No,
And
please
we
go.
too have a lab, but is that passive relationship with technology, right? And that's even those students who are in affluent schools is passive usage. And I believe that this is directly tied to the pressures that school districts face regarding federal and state standards. And in Texas, we have a sheer amount of TEKS to teach. And TEKS, T-E-K-S, stands for Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. That is our statewide curriculum and is very rigorous. And sometimes because it's so rigorous and it's a massive amount of TEKS that we have to cover in a short period of time, well, that takes time away from us being creative. You feel when it comes to technology, we're stagnated. Rather than innovating, we're being stagnated. And we have a pacing guide, and some call it a scope and sequence. And we got to get this curriculum taught because our children will be assessed over the curriculum. And so schools really don't have the freedom to fully invest in the active use of technology. And the other side of that is most schools don't have the funding to invest in the active use of technology. We had the way that many of these schools were able to get the one-to-one Chromebooks is because of the pandemic with the ESSER funds. And I believe those funds are going to run out this summer. But also, the system is geared towards closing the achievement gap. That is the focus, the achievement gap in reading and math between Black children and white children. That's what this is designed to do. That's where the focus is. And so unless, the way I see it, unless, you know, you mentioned writing grants, you have to get some other outside sources, such as tech companies and other companies writing grants, big donations. Outside of that, the funding is not there. We have a lot of the districts, even surrounding where I am here in Waco, and they are cutting staff, making deep cuts. Because the money is no longer there, and because we have declining enrollment in the public schools because you have the charter schools now. And in Texas, you get your funding, a big chunk of it comes from your student enrollment. And with a declining enrollment, people are not having babies like they used to have anymore. And you got to contend with the charter schools. And so many schools are making deep cuts. They are even closing some schools. And not to mention the countrywide shortage of teachers.
That's true,
Yeah, that's a whole other kettle of fish, right? Which
Yeah,
we'll save to our next one. But Allison, let me ask you, just to kind of get a full picture here. When you hear Julia and Cynthia talking about that the access aspect of it, the percentage of students who have this at home, you can't indulge in Minecraft for hours in a classroom. That is something that has to be something that's a bit of privilege, I would guess, for a student who is at home with those sort of access. So, I mean, what percentage is that a challenge that you have in your district? And if so, how do you overcome it? And then I'm going to ask all three of you, one takeaway that I'm beginning to get here is it ultimately the responsibility of a district to not only provide a student with the technology, say a laptop or a device, but also guarantee them access to anything that they're being assigned at school to be at home? I mean, are we at a point now where that's an extension and a responsibility of the district? That's a lot to throw on your plate, Allison.
Yeah, no,
but-
I'm grinning because thank you for asking me that question. That's just fabulous. So here's what I'll tell you about that. I do think that we have a responsibility to provide students with the resources that they need to access their education. Having said that, I very strongly believe that having internet access for students and families is not a K-12 problem. It is a community problem that our local government should be investing in. This is not an educational problem because we are at a point in our history in America that connectivity is a basic utility, right? And so if there are not programs in our communities that do that, and we're not there yet either, right? We provide MiFis for kids who potentially don't have access at home. But you know what? In some super dense, because we are both urban, suburban, and rural in my county because of how we are. But even when we give students MiFis and we've got a compression of a lot of people in a building, like say apartment buildings or high rises or things like that, sometimes those MiFis are inadequate, right? They're not strong enough. There's too many people in a condensed area. And so this is not a problem for stop giving our school districts all the problems to solve. Thank you. We are brilliant. Appreciate it. However, we need community partners to step up and own the responsibility for providing this very basic utility for our families, regardless of whether or not they have children in school or not. So that's my one soapbox. That's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is there are two different kinds of access. There is access of stuff, and I'm talking boxes and wires, meaning, yes, I need to give them a Chromebook. Yes, they need to be able to get on the Chromebook and it should work. But if all we do is give kids a Chromebook and send them home and tell them to play Minecraft. Actually, that's a bad example because Minecraft, they're at least making decisions. At least it's active, right? But if all we're doing is sending them home with a device and we are not changing the pedagogy of how we assign and design instruction for our students, then we have only given lip service to diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to using technology for student achievement, right? Access has to happen first, technical access, without question. Obviously, that has to happen. But until we shift how we design instruction and kids are asked to do different things with it, we're not really going to see the exponential growth that technology can provide for us, right? If all you're doing is taking that Chromebook or whatever tablet device, whatever you have, and you are turning your 30-year-old worksheets into digital tech worksheets, you are just not doing anything different. You've just made it a really expensive worksheet. And nothing has changed in terms of what that child's attitude about school and what they're learning. You've just digitized it, right? You just made the notebook heavier. And so there are two pieces to that access part. And I think we have to address both. You can't leave either part out. But to the crux of your question, I do think we are at a point that we owe students that, and we certainly should partner with our municipalities. But I do not think that this is a K-12 education problem. To Dr. Wise's point, we're already facing an educator shortage, right? These are big problems that are going to have to involve a lot of infrastructure, and that doesn't happen in the silo of a school district. And so we've got to have community partners, and we just cannot take on every problem for our communities. We've got to have some help with that.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. When you look at equity, and it's each individual student receives exactly what that student needs to be successful, right? But then you look back at teachers, and you have to train teachers. Where does the funding come in for that? So the emphasis in education is not on educators becoming active users of technology, and teachers don't receive that training. The training that they receive promotes passive use of technology. And so I like the fact that you said, looking at the partners, community partners, municipalities, and all of that. But also I want to add to that the continuing education for teachers and teachers prep programs. And those programs do not prepare teachers to actively use technology. I'm antiquated when I look at the definition of active usage, right? A lot of those things I don't know how to do either. I wish I did. And some of them I'm going to learn, making my business to learn on my own. But teachers need extensive training on how to actively expand the use of technologies in their classrooms. And so, again, it goes back to funding. Where does it come from? And most schools here in Texas, we're facing a deficit.
Mhm.
And if we're going to make this a primary goal, then it's going to take some radical thinking, rethinking of education in the United States.
100%.
I think sorry,
And I don't think we're there yet.
I don't either.
in our district, I think we're fortunate because that is largely my role, is to find the technology that can transform what our kids are learning. So like when I say we're doing Minecraft, we have teachers using Minecraft to teach during the day.
We do too.
Yeah. We have a class that we call Tournament of Technology in our middle school, which is geared towards 4 main categories of design, coding, robotics, and video production. And we have over 13 teachers in our middle schools we have 17 middle schools who are teaching that course now. And so it's mainstreamed with a lot of the linked learning. So they're doing that with their science teacher and their English teacher and their math teacher. And so projects of value are being incorporated into teaching. I do agree. In my opinion, we need to absolutely do away with standardized testing. It's a waste of time, because all we're doing is teaching a kid whether or not they can or cannot take a test, and most students walk away feeling that they failed. Even the high achievers who, well, if I only got 90%, well, what do I have to do to get 95%, right? It's not what is in the market now. So a lot of what I've been working on in our district is providing students with internships during their class period. So I work with industry partners across the United States, actually across the world, to work with those students during their class period on real world projects, training teachers on how to play Minecraft. I'll teach you how to do that, teaching them Arduinos and Raspberry Pis and how to work with robots and drones and coding. And so like that, I feel very blessed to be able to, that's a large part of my job, is to find out this teacher's struggling. Let me go in and sit. Now I'll also say I have a huge background in communication and conflict resolution. So I go in with a teacher and it's like I have an agenda, and I'll sit down and be like, okay, what is it you're struggling with and how do we make you successful? Because if you're successful, your kids are going to be successful. We can't just focus only on the student, right? That teacher often needs support and love and care that maybe they haven't gotten to prepare them to change with society as it's changing. So I think too, yes, it's investing. Yes, absolutely, having community partners. We have, matter of fact, today I have an industry partner subcommittee meeting for our digital media arts and design, where I work with these partners, locally, to work with our kids, to come in and provide them opportunities. And even if it's guest speakers or a Q&A, or, it could be an internship, it could be a mentorship, it could be showing up at the school and providing, a 2-hour just exploratory event or activity for them in their field. That's where we are focused in our department. And I know that not all districts have that ability to have somebody on staff, but I think that's part of where it starts. Is we've got to get administrators to understand that things are changing. Like, kids now can graduate high school, and I'll use my son as an example, graduate high school with, some technical training and get an immediate job in their field of interest. So my son is a software engineer, and he, out of high school, got a job for $65,000 a year as a developer for a company. right? That we can teach our kids that. And that's where I think our focus needs to be.
Yeah.
And no, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, no, I was going to say, you know, the toughest part of my job this afternoon was going to be to end the conversation.
Oh,
And I promised to keep you guys, you know, within an hour, and like, boom, like, there we go. And I mean, there's so much here to already, you know, kind of grab onto. And I know we're going to be able to take a lot of great content out of this and share these best practices, you know, with our readers and our listeners. So I appreciate that. But maybe to wrap up, if we could each go around, and Dr. Wise, you know, I like to end most of my conversations on a positive note. I mean, and this one's, while there's so many challenges, there are, just from listening to the three of you talk amongst yourselves, so many opportunities for improvement. But maybe I'll ask each of you as we wrap up here to kind of look into your crystal ball a little bit and see, all things being equal, I'll use the phrase in our DEI conversation, what your hopes would be, you know, 2 or 3 years down the line, if we start to incorporate some of the things that we talked about, the messaging, the support of teachers, the recognition of all the people in the community, and maybe the engagement of the community and partners to bring, which seems to be a pretty basic aspect, is that every family should have access to the internet like they have access to water or electricity. And even in the most extreme cases, they're there. So, Dr. Wise, I'll start with you first, to just kind of give us your hopeful vision. Hopefully, there's a hopeful vision there. I'm pretty confident there is. In the
Oh
next
yeah,
couple
I'm always optimistic, right? But it's going to require a systematic shift in education. And education as a whole is very conservative. And so it's going to take some time, but I know we will get there. I'm not saying that we are not offering any type of active usage of technology. We do it, but we don't do it with fidelity. And that is what is needed. We have summer programs where the students do coding, gaming is taught, and more so when you get into the high school. I'm sure there are various programs that are there, but I believe the earlier we start with our students at the elementary level, then they will become more proficient as they progress on to the secondary level. But I don't think we have to be careful and not lose sight that one of the most significant parts of elementary instruction needs to be a focus on learning to read and write in order for elementary school students to be successful at that elementary level and beyond. And I see where technology will play a significant role. There are some awesome programs because we use them to reinforce those reading, writing, and math skills. But I would love for us to get to the point where our students will become active users. So is anybody out there, any benefactors out there, Bill Gates, call me, please. You know, you can take my school. We can be a pilot school, and let's just make this happen.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Allison, any last thoughts?
So crystal ball, my hopes for tech and DEI. I actually feel like, so I started teaching in 1990, it doesn't matter. It was a long time ago. And, you know, we talked about the jargon and the acronyms that we use in education. One of the other things that we're known for is our, we get buzzwords, and then we like to grind a buzzword into the ground, right? And in the late 90s, one of those buzzwords, and I heard it in every early teacher program PD I did back in the day, they would talk about, we are gonna have a paradigm shift, right? And so for 20 some years, I've been looking around waiting for the paradigm shift, because here's the deal. We're still testing the mess out of kids just like we did in the late 90s. The reality is that what gets measured gets done. Right? So we test on all those standardized tests, we test whether or not we covered content, right? So, but what if we said the 4 C's were important and we measured and reported on that? I don't know how we do that, right? That's messier. It's not black and white, it's gray. We've got to have some shifts in what we assess. But I do think that there is a paradigm shift on the horizon, and I think it's coming to us by way of AI and all of the things that we can shift. And so for the first time in my 20-some year career, I think that we have some technology that can actually give time back to teachers. Forever, we just keep adding to the plate and we're not taking anything away. But AI has the potential to take some of those productivity tasks and those mundane, repetitive, paperworking tasks and offload those so that teachers can get back to the art of connecting with children on a human level so that they can know them by name, strength, and need and be able to help them be successful. And so I think to all that to sum up, I think if we can be more strategic about what we measure and what we report, then maybe we can change our attitudes about assessment and then start focusing on the things that we know can really move the needle. And I think AI is going to help us do some of that by offloading some of the tasks for teachers. So I'm hoping that a real paradigm shift is on the horizon.
And we got almost through an entire hour without saying AI.
Sorry.
No,
I'm
but
living and breathing it right now.
I was going to, but I didn't.
But what a great in terms of the forward thinking, and again, giving us a glass half full instead of scaring people about AI, and especially the teachers,
That's
and
right.
saying here's a tool that can make your job easier, maybe keep you as a teacher and help solve that shortage. So thank you for that, Allison. Julie, we'll leave you with the last word.
The last word, Allison Reid for Secretary of Education of the United States of America.
He has my vote.
You're kind. You're kind.
Girlfriend. Just straight up, like, there's nothing more to say. She's exactly right. Like, AI is going to help teachers, and we need to help them embrace that. It is going to give them back time and let them make those connections. I literally almost started crying when you said that, because that's no joke, because that's what's needed. That is what's needed, is teachers need.
And it's possible.
Time. Yes.
Right now. It's possible right now.
Feel loved and cared for, and they don't. Right. And I mean, how do we expect teachers to teach when they're just robots almost in front of a classroom,
What?
having to teach to all of these standards that kids aren't embracing, right? Like, it's not engaging. Anyway, all that to say, I 100% agree with what both Cynthia and Allison have shared. I think that we definitely need a shift. We can do what little bits we can in our district, but it needs to come from the top down. So if you ever run, Allison, you have my email. I will be your campaign manager, girlfriend.
Writing your name down right now.
Count me in.
Right?
Thank you.
I'm all
and
in.
also, I just want to say too, Allison, your experience and how you articulate what we all feel is just, you have a way. There's a way about you. So
Well, thank you
girlfriend,
very much. I hope I get a chance to meet you both in person. I'll be at COSIN and ISD. Come find me if you're at either.
Oh, I will be at ISD. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, come find me. I would love to hug your neck and make a friend in person.
I will be doing a couple sessions, so you can find me.
Yeah,
I know
ditto.
you are
So
as
let's
well.
try to
You
find each
got
other.
it. You got it.
Well, I'll reiterate what Julie says for all of you. I mean, I was worried about this topic. I mean, it is as fuzzy can get, right? I mean, we can go down so many different rabbit holes when it comes to what it means, and especially in terms of what at eSchool News we want to be talking about the implementation of technology when it comes to that. But we came away with some really concrete takeaways here, so which I'm going to digest, we'll put together, and we'll put up online, and hopefully there'll be best practices that we can share with our readers and listeners, and maybe go forward. I mean, Allison, I'll follow up. I mean, I think a manifesto is in your future pretty soon. I mean, there are a couple of things there that we can
Don't get me on my soapbox. You don't have enough time today.
Well, I could see tacking something to the front door of the DOE is like, all right, here's your plan. This is great. But every family, I mean, there needs to be a plan of how to work with your local government to make sure, right?
That's
So
right.
And local governments are so different across the country, right? In North
Correct.
Carolina, our school board doesn't have taxing authority. So if we're out of money, we're just out of luck,
yeah,
right? But it's
Yeah.
so different everywhere that I do think that some national conversations would be beneficial to all of
Yeah.
us.
and how to just disperse. E-rate is one of the most successful federal programs in the history of this country. It hasn't completely solved things, but I mean, it's been pretty steady Eddie. Now, how do you change that? See, I'm getting on my own soapbox here, so I better step off.
It's okay.
We'll leave it to further conversation. We're hard up against 3:00, and I promised I did upgrade my Zoom so it wouldn't cut us all off. I got
Okay, that
I got
40
the pro
minutes,
version.
right?
Yeah, because we would have lost each other about 7 minutes ago. But
Well, and I want to thank you, Kevin, for selecting women, because I think often, even though we might have a greater percentage in education, our voices aren't as amplified often, in the space. So thank you for selecting three women to be on your
Really,
panel.
we really will be good friends, Julie.
All right.
all right,
I love it.
I echo that. Thank you, Kevin.